You're in the right place at the right time, stretching from the distant spaceports of Black Spire and Mos Eisley all the way to the jewel of the core at Coruscant and the bright center of the galaxy, slamming into your holoprojector like a supercharged nanoparticle of coaxium. This is the Star Wars Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, John, and my co-host is
Jason.
And we are here to bring you your needed dose of Star Wars film, TV, book, comic, gaming, and collecting news. The date is January 25th, 2021, and there's a couple brief Star Wars news items I wanted to mention. We have just over a couple weeks ago, The High Republic finally came out after a delay of, I think, about 6 months. I think COVID was blamed for how that got pushed back because that was going to be a 2020 thing originally.
Mm-hmm.
But it is out, and I won't get to it for quite a while, but it's there waiting for me when it is.
It looms like a shadow.
Over everything we built here. Yeah, that's the thing. I kind of wanted to, even though it's canon and the old stuff isn't, I still kind of wanted to go further back in the timeline and merge my reading with it, because I'm about probably a third of the way through the Old Republic stuff. I'm still plugging away on my Knights of the Old Republic game for the last 3 years, and as soon as I sit down and get through that and read some of those Old Republic novels, I wanted to finish those and then jump into the High Republic. So
it's just, it's more young adult stuff, and it's hard.
It's more young adult stuff. It's hard to get
excited for it, because it doesn't seem. It's kind of like the Young Jedi Knight books. It's hard to consider it to be 100% canon. It's kind of light. It's lighter.
Right. I will say though, initial reports and reviews of the first book have been really glowing from people whose word I implicitly trust. So it's probably good. I just, on the surface, there's nothing that seems to excite me a whole lot. But whatever. I'll get to it. I'm sure it'll be fine.
It has sort of the same issue, without getting it too deep. It doesn't have to be a huge discussion, but has the issue always that prequel and filler stuff has, where where everything is going,
right?
So there's not like a sense of danger.
Yeah, there's not a big unknown, because the Jedi Order is not going to fall. The Republic's not going to fall.
Certain characters that may pop up aren't going to die, or whatever.
Like Yoda and everything. That is a thing, and that's something I have issue with some of the prequel era stuff, but that's also the fun of it, because they can kind of lean into things. It's like, well, if you're roped in a certain area, you can lean into that and use it to your advantage.
It just depends on how they do it. Hopefully they tease stuff that that's going to happen and stuff, and at least it'll be quick to read, since it's young adult stuff. So
right, should be light and breezy, and so we'll get to that probably in 2025 or so. And in other news, Alan Tudyk has said in interviews that he is not taking part as K2SO in this first season of Andor, and he is announced as being part of the cast, but he said he's not in season 1. Now, the rumor was that this was going to be a limited series, just a one-shot kind of thing. So we're like, oh, I guess this implies there's a season 2, which I'm fine with, but considering the glacial pace it's coming out, I hope that means season 2 isn't as long a wait as what we've already had.
Yeah, or it's a misdirect, right?
It could be,
because it's like assumed, right? It's not like Tamora Morrison and Boba Fett, or Rosario Dawson as
Yeah.
Ahsoka. It's because those were like, it doesn't necessarily have to happen, but you kind of have to have what's his face,
Alan
K2
Tudyk.
and Alan Tudyk. Yeah, I mean, John, a complete blank. He has to show up at some point, right? So
Yeah, if you're gonna have
that
Cassian and everything. What's interesting though,
because it's a fan favorite, right? Like that's the
yeah,
biggest thing.
yeah, and also what's interesting is there's been a lot of discussion, like when Andor was announced, I think already almost 2 years ago now. There was a lot of discussion about, are they going to rewrite the meeting of K2SO and Cassian, because it was shown in a one-shot comic where I haven't read it now for already a couple years, but he goes into a base. It shows how he got reprogrammed to be a rebel robot for K2. And are they gonna, rewrite that whole scene and throw out the comic? Or
They're
because
not supposed to
everything
do
is
that.
canon,
They're
yeah,
not supposed to do that.
everything is canon. I think they're aware of that. People like Pablo, that's their job. They're aware of those things. I would say it's actually very likely they would write that one-shot comic into the series, because
Yeah.
as an example, there was Operation Cinder was originally in the um, Shattered Empire comic series, which takes place right after Return of the Jedi. That seemed on the surface like a minor thing as far as the larger continuity. We later saw it depicted in Battlefront 2 in the story campaign, and then we, of course, heard it mentioned on The Mandalorian and some other sources. And that was just a little thing in a comic book, and then they later connected it to the larger, series and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, they'll probably write in, the meeting between them, and it could be part of an episode, or it could be the first episode. I don't see any problem. But
See,
yeah,
it could just be a misdirect, or
yeah,
it could just imply, it could be limited. It doesn't have to be just one series. It could be limited to two season
right.
series or whatever. Especially if they really like how the writing is going
Mm-hmm.
and the filming is going. They could be like, because they'll greenlight stuff early, even before
Yeah.
something premieres, based on how the production went, how the production's looking,
Yes.
finished episodes look and stuff. They can tell if it's going to be a hit or
Right.
whatever.
Kind of
So
like how they loved The Last Jedi as it approached release, and they gave Ryan Johnson a whole trilogy. Kind of like that.
yes, and then where's
And
this
then there's
trilogy
been
now?
nothing. You know, to be fair though, it's not been said what the fate of that trilogy is. And I
uh,
think it's still listed on official Star Wars website materials
I
from
don't
what
think it's happening.
I that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that's
But
that's
it's another story another
that's
day.
not yeah.
Although if we want to really get in those Last Jedi haters on our clicks, hey, we're the place, guys. Jason's your man. So
I do not like that movie.
hashtag sequel trilogy hate, sequeltrilogyhate.com. That's our new website. George JJ raped my
with his
adulthood.com.
with his dick nose.
Yes.
Anyway,
Anyway, our main subject today for our topic is a continuation of one we did a couple months ago. We're gonna do part 2 of our Bantam discussion, the Bantam years of Star Wars novels, which basically was the 90s. It was 91 to 99, I believe, on original
right up
content.
until the end, I guess. Right
Yeah.
up until December.
Yep. And then there was still, like paperbacks, I think came out the next year of
Right.
there was something in 2000 that was a paperback of a previous release. But And of course, there's still been
Oh,
legends.
maybe it
Um,
was Visions of the Future. I'm trying to think of. I'm looking at the list and I'm trying to think of what would actually have been a
it could have
hardback.
been that was late '98 when it came out,
Yeah,
so it was probably
yeah,
late '99 when it hit paperback. But yeah, there was probably a couple things, and then of course there's been legends reprintings. There's been quite a few reprintings. I mentioned to you off the show how I had those Young Jedi Knights collections that were, there was two
yeah.
paperbacks. I've got one right next to me actually. Um, Jedi Shadow, which collects the first three Young Jedi Knights books, and this is it says Berkeley Jam Edition, September 2003. So they were, I don't know what was going on in 2003. I guess that was like Clone Wars and New Jedi Order was wrapping up, but they were still putting stuff out. And then there was another Young Jedi Knights collection. I think, let's see, this one's Jedi Shadow. I think the other one's called Jedi Sunrise. And
Was that like a tequila sunrise?
yeah. Um, but yeah, so there was things here and there, and then but we wanted to talk about some of the novels we didn't get around to in our last conversation. So, and we were kind of jumping all over the place a little
Yeah,
bit.
I started talking about New Jedi Order, which was not Bantam.
No, no, and you know that is something we'll probably cover more at
Well, that's the
length.
funny thing,
But
right? Because I continued reading into the Del Rey stuff.
yeah,
You almost didn't. Like you
no, I read a couple. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think if I read any Del
Del Rey
Rey
books.
in the new period, because
Yeah.
you know because it wasn't until 2015 that I read Tatooine Ghost, so that was one. But without looking at a list, which I
Well,
don't have
I
up
guess
right
that might
now,
be prequel stuff. I mean, did you read any of the prequel books?
I read the novelizations and I read. That was the thing though. The Jedi Apprentice books, I don't think were technically under Del Rey. I think they were under another printing
Yeah.
press.
Yeah.
But I don't think I read an original Del Rey novel. Oh wait, no, no, no. I read Darth Maul Shadowhunter, and I
Okay.
read Cloak of Deception. Your copy of that actually.
Oh, yeah. Was that on one of the trips?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
okay.
C2.
Yeah.
I read that, and I credit myself for actually finishing that book on the trip. Because I would, I was well known for bringing books and then not reading them. But that one, probably because it was yours, and I knew I had a limited time to finish it. I was
Well,
like,
there was a time when you didn't have, all this information at your fingertips on the internet. So
yeah,
you
yeah.
had to bring the library to
No, I
reference.
I know. Like these days, you can just throw an ebook on a reader and or your phone or whatever, and yeah. But anyway, um, so we kind of covered the Thrawn trilogy in bits and pieces. We talked about I gave my story about the Black Fleet crisis, finishing that trilogy across 12 years or 15 years or whatever it was. And then let's see, we talked about, I don't know if we really covered the Jedi Academy trilogy. I don't think we did. So what's some of your thoughts and memories on the Jedi Academy
I
books?
remember liking it. I never had a problem with Kevin J. Anderson.
Hmm.
Um, I I thought it was really weird in the books when there would be kind of a weird display of force powers. So like when
Yeah.
Luke does kind of the telekinesis walk.
Hmm.
Um, well, I can't
Over
remember
the
who he's.
lava.
Yeah, I can't remember who he's recruiting. Um,
Gantoris.
Gantoris, right? Okay, so and I think in his mind, Luke had remarked to himself like, "Oh, maybe this is how we got the Skywalker name."
Right,
Um,
right, right.
that scene stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Um, and anytime there's like anytime there's like a weird display of force powers, which, you know, kind of like Rise of Skywalker, there's all sorts of weird displays of force powers that you hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
I think it's important too. I mean, it's one thing now late in the game to introduce new force things, which is fine, used sparingly. But it's funny to think that during The Empire Strikes Back, there was probably a segment of fans going, "What the hell is this telekinesis crap?" You know?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's kind of it amps it up, right? Like,
yeah,
it's like, whoa, you can actually, like, you know, throw a whole room at somebody.
right. So it's
And
funny how
like,
the
you know, augment
movies,
your jump, and
yeah,
stuff.
force
And
jump, and it's funny how the movies kind of added to the lexicon of the force, like in bits and pieces.
mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously the prequels did with midi-chlorians, and then there was
The force speed,
force speed, like a force
when
run.
yeah, force run. And then they kind of like shimmer themselves too
Yes,
when they're running down the
yes,
hall, which was kind of weird. And you don't see it again, so it's kind of like, oh, that's weird. But that thing with the telekinesis walk, it kind of fits within that rule set of the
yeah,
force. It doesn't break it, because it's like, yeah, I mean, if you can move an object, you can move yourself, right? If you're
right,
doing a force jump, you know, you're obviously you're helping yourself. It's kind of,
right.
it just stuck out in my head. And then you know, Kip Duran is Kip Duran.
Yeah,
Kinda,
it
he was
was
like the only annoying part in the book, I think.
yeah, he was the typical kind of tempestuous youth, almost kind of cliched in a certain way, because once we knew he had the Force and he started learning from Luke in the second book, it's like, okay, he'll be tempted by the dark side, and
Mm-hmm.
I
And of
think
course,
that
he's like super powerful and all
he's
that
super
stuff.
powerful. I mean, you could write it off, or I think they said it was basically Exar Kun giving him extra powers through his disembodied spirit or whatever.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it is interesting. Now, what's also funny is that began the trope of Luke having fallen students. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was the first book to do it, but then that became a running thing through other Bantam books.
Yes.
And then even the Young Jedi Knights, which had Brachis or Brachis, however you say it, he was already a Dark Jedi at the beginning, but his backstory was that he was a fallen student at Luke's
Mm-hmm.
academy. And then we see Brachis in the New Rebellion working under Kreller, whose real name was Dolph, who was a fallen student of Luke's. And then there's also, was it Dasan from Jedi Outcast, kind of the lizard looking guy? I think he was a fallen student at Luke's academy on the backstory of that.
Yeah, it's really bad track record.
Yeah, and this is just a 5 or 6 year period, and
Mm-hmm.
I never thought it destroyed the continuity of the Praxium or anything like that. I mean, to me, it's kind of like if you have X amount of students, not every single one of them is going to turn out perfect or the way you think. So there's always going to be struggles. But it's funny that there was just enough to actually get pulled to the dark side. Like, not just fail, but like be turned into dark Jedi or,
Right. They get,
villains.
yeah. I think that they it just became way too like, well, if you fail as a Jedi, you're going to be a dark Jedi.
I love how the Imperial Remnant or other warlords were right there to offer supplies and troops and Star Destroyers, whoever became a Dark Jedi.
I know,
It's
right? Like, it's almost like they're just waiting around
like,
for a
hey,
dark
right over
Jedi to
here,
take over.
check it out, dude. We got Star Destroyers. You're gonna love it. But I think the story ideas like that is where it kind of ends up becoming almost like an animated series. It's just like one of those. It's like a GI Joe thing. It's like, oh, here's that trope. But
Yeah.
Yeah, overall, I did enjoy the Jedi Academy books. When I read them the first time, I was very engaged. Um, I remember at the end of Jedi Search, I used to always read these. They don't really have them now, but remember how at the end of books you get a preview chapter of the next one?
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, oh, and I remember the preview chapter for Dark Apprentice was Akbar flying to, I think, the planet Vortex with I think it was with Leia in the back seat of his B-wing,
Mm-hmm.
and they crash, and I think that was the scene, and there was this big thing, or it might have been just Akbar himself, but I remember going to school the next day and telling my friend Cameron about that scene. I was like, "Whoa, dude, did Akbar die? Like, holy crap!" And he's like, "Well, I could tell you because I read the book." And he's like, "No, no, no, he's fine." So he just like gave me kind of a spoiler, but it was like I wanted to know. I was that
Yeah.
engaged. I was like,
Yeah.
"Whoa!"
Yeah.
And but then I remember I got Dark Apprentice probably a week or two later. I devoured Dark Apprentice. That was, I think, the only Star Wars book I read in one day. Like, that was crazy. And it was like, to think now, when you think back on it, it wasn't
You
a
must have
Zahn
been
novel.
blazing, man. You
Dude,
were.
and this is when I was in high school too. It must have been the weekend, but like I just remember sitting on the couch, sitting in my room, and just like burning through it because I wanted to know what happened to Kip Duran, what happens to Admiral Dalla, what happens to Akbar. It was just the plot just pulled me in, and I think it was just a few days later I had Champions of the Force, and I burned through that one pretty quick too. And yeah, actually, Dark Apprentice is one of the first Star Wars novels I remember seeing because when I was playing TIE Fighter the year before, I think Dark Apprentice had just come out. It was like summer '94, and I was at Ventura Books, and I remember just kind of skimming through, like, oh, I think I'll check out the Star Wars novels. I've been playing TIE Fighter. I'll take a look. I remember seeing the hardcover for the Truce at Bakura, and then I remember seeing the spine of Dark Apprentice, which has Akbar's face and a exploding Star Destroyer, I think, on the side. And I was like, whoa, Akbar's in a novel. Like, holy crap. It continues his story.
So easily blown away.
Yeah, it was just the heady days of high school, man. And so, yeah, overall, Jedi Academy trilogy is very comic book like, very simplistic. The plot was not super intricate or anything, but it was refreshing, and it did big things for the Star Wars continuity when you think about it. Luke has his Praxium, he gets his students, he goes to Yavin 4 again. You got Exar Kun, and at that point, the Sith had not been seen a lot in the Star Wars expanded universe because that was still a kind of a it was an area that had to be treaded lightly
Yeah.
from Lucas.
Yeah.
He would mark the yes no little check boxes on what they could write about and then send
Mm-hmm.
it back. And it's funny, I think because of that, even though there was some things that had to be smoothed over with the prequels, I think the Old Republic Sith merged fairly well with Maul and Sidious and everything. There wasn't any humongous change. Not like Zahn, who was like wanted to make the Nogri the Sith.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would have been a little more difficult. Um, but yeah. Any other thoughts on Jedi Academy?
No, I mean, it was kind of interesting that Dala was a female. We
That's
hadn't
true.
seen that before.
Right.
Um,
For an Imperial.
yeah, and it's not even like it was like they couldn't like there wouldn't be a female. Like I don't
Yeah.
think there was anything that explicitly said. Just like there's not, I don't think, I mean, I don't think there was anything direct from Lucas that would imply that there
Yeah.
couldn't have been aliens
Yeah.
in the Imperials. That was kind of, I think, I want to say it was kind of sort of
That was
fleshed out
purely, that was,
later.
yes. Yes.
That
That was
was
purely an
EU
author.
stuff.
That was kind of an author call because there wasn't even role-playing books or guidebooks that said that either. It was just
Yeah.
implied because they're space Nazis that they'd probably have certain
Right. And
limitations.
obviously in the movies, you don't see any aliens or females.
Except for on The Mandalorian, we had that. Well, there was a few in the Disney era. There's
Well, yeah,
female
I mean,
officers.
obviously now, yeah. But I mean,
Obviously now.
I just mean back in
The
the
Force is
original
female,
trilogy.
Jason.
I just mean in the original
Yeah,
trilogy, there was
for
no
sure.
source for that. So,
No,
but
no. It
you
was,
know,
yeah. Uh,
so Dala was cool.
Dala was cool.
And it's nice
She
they didn't
was,
kill her either, so she could
yeah.
show up again later. Because
And from what
doesn't
I
she limp off
understand,
with her fleet? She like limps away.
she limps off, and then Kevin J. Anderson picks up the story again in Darksaber,
Right.
which we could go right into now. And that was that was the middle part of the quote unquote Callista trilogy, which was, it never had an official name, that trilogy, but that was Kevin J. Anderson and Barbara Hambly kind of having a rough trilogy, which that is hit and miss for a lot of people. And actually, we'll talk about Children of the Jedi first, since that's book one. But I had mixed feelings because when I read the sample chapter of Children of the Jedi in my Star Wars Galaxy magazine, spring 1995, I was so unenthused from the sample chapter that I didn't read that hardcover when it came out. And even when it came out in paperback, I didn't immediately grab it. And it was just like, because so it's weird. I started with Darksaber, and then I read later on, I did read Children of the Jedi in '97.
Mm-hmm.
So I read book 2, then book 1, then book 3. But that was the thing with the Bantam era, because things came out of chronological order
Yeah.
most times. It was just kind of an interesting way to experience it, and that's okay. It was a hodgepodge, but
Well, they were filling a lot of holes, but part of the problem was they created holes.
they
So there
created
would
holes.
be, and they felt the need to like fill in those holes. Like,
And it's weird. Okay, this is something also I wanted to cover on the Bantam era. We will never see that again. That kind of storytelling will never happen again in Star Wars on that level, because they made the stories super epic because they knew they weren't going to be movies, they weren't going to be filmed.
right.
So they had this huge like freedom to just be crazy with super weapons and give Luke a relationship and kill
And I
this
don't, the
person.
other
And
thing too is I don't think they ever thought Lucas would
no,
finish, to make 3 more movies. I mean,
but
he never, it
yeah,
hadn't been since the 80s, I think, that he had given any indication of
I think
doing a sequel
because
trilogy.
he was just starting work on the prequels, I think everyone, and rightly so, I think assumed that the post Return of the Jedi period was going to be pretty secure no matter what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, I think his only concern that he gave them was, you can't kill Luke, Han, or Leia. I
Mm-hmm.
think that was one of his guidelines, and I think he said, there was another thing I read somewhere years ago, like back in the '90s. I think they weren't supposed to go 25 years after Return of the Jedi. That was kind of the cutoff. But then obviously the New Jedi Order, I think, went right up to that border on the
Mm-hmm.
timeline. And then obviously they went beyond it when they had the Dark Nest books and all those other things like
Yeah, I
Legacy of the
suspect it
Force.
was kind of. I suspect it was kind of just an insurance thing,
Yeah, yeah, it
which I
was.
don't even know. I mean, you have this like 25-year cutoff, but it's like, I mean, whatever you're going to make is not going to adhere to these books. I mean,
I
if
think I
Lucas is going to
think
make more stuff, it's not going to
I
adhere to
think
the books.
the reason was they did start the Darkness and everything was the prequels that ended right then in
Mm-hmm.
'05. And so that was what opened up Del Rey and the authors was, oh, it's obvious he's not making 7, 8, and 9 now. And
Right.
Lucas was like, I'm not, so let's go crazy. Like, let's
Yeah.
go really crazy.
And
And
I suspect that the only reason he even wrote treatments and stuff for a sequel trilogy was just to incentivize Disney to buy.
that could be. That very well could
So,
be. Um, but
or maybe
anyway,
not. I don't know.
yeah.
Anyway,
Going
that's not Bantam.
going back to I wanted to say about Children of the Jedi. When I finally did read it, I found the hardcover for like a bargain book price. It was like $5 at my
What?
local like.
Really? It went into the bargain bin? That's
You know,
crazy.
yeah, I know. I used to find some really great Star Wars hardcovers, and so I remember reading it. It didn't super engage me. It was just kind of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What I realized about Barbara Hambly, it's one of those Star Wars novels that I basically appreciated later. And when I read her prose a few years ago, it was really impressive. Actually, her world building was really good, and her prose was very detailed and very descriptive. And I really liked the planet Belsavis. It was like this frozen planet that had these steam vents down below in these valleys where everything was like jungle almost and like
Mm-hmm.
really humid. And it was an interesting planet. And then, of course, you had the Eye of Palpatine battle moon that Luke is stuck on with these Jawas and Tusken Raiders and all these creatures that were accidentally picked up when it malfunctioned. And then he falls in love with the spirit of Callista. And that was kind of bittersweet at the time because you just know that's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
So it's just kind of like, you know. And I mean, I think there was before Planet of Twilight came out, there was groups of fans on the AOL boards. I remember they were like, Luke has to end up with Callista because the fate was unknown. But the thing was, there was already books that had been out a few years later in the timeline, and Callista's not around. So it was
Yeah.
like there was this whole speculation: did Callista die, or did she leave, or what? I remember those days back then when people were like, "Where is she?"
Well,
And
shippers aren't a new thing.
no, they certainly aren't. Um, but yeah, so that book was just okay at the time. I greatly appreciated it later when I read it a few years ago. Um, do you remember anything about Children of the Jedi yourself?
Not really. Just the weird. Uh, was it a battle moon or was it a ship?
It's like an asteroid, but it was a
Oh,
ship.
that's right, an asteroid. Okay, yeah,
But it
like
looked
a
like an
converted.
asteroid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just remember picking up the aliens for some. I can't remember the reason. It was like supposed to pick up troops or something.
Yeah, it was going to pick up stormtroopers on different planets to then, because it was pre-programmed to go to Belsavis to kill the children of the Jedi, which this one Jedi was like securing these kids after the purge.
Why? Why would they need an automated ship to do that? It's
Yeah, I
so
know.
contrived.
I
I mean, it's
know.
interesting. It's fine. It's
Yeah. Okay, so you kind of just it's your memories are
vague.
blurry and
Yeah, it's blurry. I mean, was that the one with like Palpatine's grandson or something?
yes, yes. So on Belsavis, there's Roganda Ismarin, who
Oh yes,
Leia recognizes from her days in the Imperial Court, and
yes, Marin.
she was a concubine of Palpatine, and then she has this son, and she realizes who she is after some digging, and they face off, and Yeah, Irek Ismarin. He ends up being able to control droids through the
Yes. Yeah, I
Force.
remember that being his special force power.
Right. And that was an interesting angle. And so it was weird at the time. We were like, is Irek, like the brother of like Triclops, like there was all these things about that. But he did later show up in, I think, one of the Legacy of the Force books, or one of those later trilogies that I don't know anything about. But yeah, so Children of the Jedi, I recommend people should revisit it. Because the prose is really great, the world building is great. It just might not be for everybody. But Dark Saber, which came out about 6 months after Children of the Jedi in November '95, I picked up, I think, a day or two after it came out. And back in those days, unless I saw something in Insider or Star Wars Galaxy magazine, sometimes I didn't know there was a new Star Wars novel coming out. I
Oh
would
no,
just go
yeah.
to Barnes and Noble, and boom, there's a brand new Drew Struzan painting, in hardcover on a nice glossy Star Wars novel. And that was those days. I miss those days, when you just don't know and you just show up, and
Yeah,
there
like a
you go.
happy surprise.
Yeah, it was really cool. And so I remember bugging my mom. I was like, "Mom, oh, I gotta get Darksaber. I gotta get Darksaber," and she got it right away. And then I plowed through it probably a couple days. And at the time, I remember, I think even at the time on my first read, I was like, this isn't that great. I remember, like, I started to take note of the limitations of Kevin J. Anderson. I was like, I don't know. It's like very simplistic. It just felt like a retread. He was like, I don't know. It was just written very poorly, and almost like not even on the quality of a young adult book, but like it was written more simplistic than even like Young Jedi Knights, I felt. And then you had the dark saber. It was like Durga the Hutt getting the plans of the Death Star and creating a big lightsaber shaped space station.
Yeah, it was basically just the super laser part of
Right,
the
right.
Death Star.
Yeah, and then you had Luke and Callista going around to different planets trying to rediscover her force powers, which were lost when she took over the body of Cray at the end of Children of the Jedi. And there was some cool scenes here and there. The one scene I love, and I've talked about before, is when they go to Hoth and they're attacked by Wampas, and there's a great scene where a one-armed Wampa, who we all know which one it is like howling at the top of this like hill.
Yeah.
And there's all these other Wampas, and as soon as you read the part where it has like one arm, you're like, oh dude,
It's the Wampa.
it's the one. And it's like, I don't know, that scene was really badass. I will give credit to that.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was a fun scene. There's like this other like hunters on the planet. They were there to like hunt Wampas, and they get overwhelmed with Luke and Callista. And then the other parts. I mean, General Madine dies. He's shot by
Yes.
Durga the Hutt in the chest, and that's it. Like, and I think that was one of the few cases where a Bantam novel killed a movie character, but it's like, it's just General Madine, so it's not like,
Shit's Madine.
yeah, shit's Madine. You don't feel like, I don't know, the stakes weren't like great.
Well, I
It
mean,
wasn't.
come on. Who would be emotionally attached to Madine? Right?
Well, maybe me, because he was my one action figure when I was 6.
Okay,
But
well,
no,
did you shed a tear? I didn't think so.
no. The hair is what dissuaded me from my emotion. But and the thing is, I remember Kevin J. Anderson saying in an interview he wanted to have Mon Mothma die from her illness in the Jedi Academy
Mm-hmm.
trilogy, but then he had Silgal heal her. And I feel like if Mon Mothma did die, that actually would have add more gravitas to that trilogy, and that would have,
Yeah.
it would have. And then Leia takes over as chief of state, which she did anyway. But I don't know. The Bantam books, they played it too safe a lot of times. That was their problem. Um, they were written into a corner a lot of times because if you have one book come out a certain part of the timeline, you got to adhere to that later. So it was hit and miss. And I don't know. Any other thoughts on Darksaber?
No, just I it's annoying to have yet another super weapon, yet
Yes.
another Death Star based
Yeah.
weapon.
No kidding, man.
And I really wasn't a fan of how the you know the trainees, the Jedi trainees,
Hmm.
uh, push the fleet away with the Force.
Oh, right, right. And
It's just
Dorsk 81 burns to a crisp.
yeah, it's just
It was
it's
it
just kind
was
of hokey.
it's one thing for Starkiller to pull down a Star Destroyer in The Force Unleashed. It's another thing to push a fleet away. Even if they were, I think they were drawing on all their powers together through Dorsk 81.
Well, they what it is they take what Yoda said too literal,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like that's the problem.
Yeah,
They're
no, I
taking what
know.
he says literally, like, oh yeah, you can move planets with the Force, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
which maybe you can. I mean, push fleet away or whatever.
Sure.
It's just
No,
kind of
it
not
just
satisfying. It'd be more fun if it was like a big fleet battle or something. Or
right. That's the thing. It as a concept, it's pretty cool. It's something that like my inner 12-year-old is like, yeah, that's so awesome. But like my jaded, adult self is just like, that's so lame. Like, because then by raising the stakes that high, it's hard to do anything to top it in other stories and books. So it's just like
mm-hmm.
it kind of overshadows everything else. Like, well, why don't you do that all the time?
Yeah, it's the hyperspace ramming of the Bantam books.
Yeah, seriously. Um,
I mean,
and
obviously
then
you don't want to expend trainees,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
doing that every time, but you
right.
know,
And then we in early 1997 we had Planet of Twilight, which wrapped up Callista's part of the story, and I have not read this one since 98. So my memory is a little blurry, but from what I recall, Leia is kidnapped by Seti Ashgad, who's this governor of what is the planet? Anyway, he's the governor of this planet, and then Luke ends up there also looking for Callista. He crashes, so a lot of the story is Luke finding his way on this planet where I think it changes the force. There's these like crystal things on the planet, and I can't remember if it magnifies or it changes his use of the force. I don't think it negates it, but it's Luke being crippled yet again. That was another running trope in the
oh
Bantam
yeah, he's always
books.
got to have a. I think what Children of the Jedi, he had a
He had a
broken
broken leg
leg or
or
something.
a bum leg, and then Zahn, of course, took away his force powers on Mirkur with
Yeah.
the Yasala Miri. So there was always something in the Bantam books. Luke could just never be himself. And then even when he was, like in the Crystal Star, which is one of the worst books, even when he was himself, he was an asshole. In that book, he has arguments with Han
Mm-hmm.
because Han is palling up with Zaviri, his old girlfriend. And so Luke is like chastising him like he's being unfaithful to Leia. And it's like, yeah, so people hated Luke's depiction in the Crystal Star. But and we don't even need to really cover that book too much. It was just
Wasn't
it
there a
was
reason though that he was the he was being affected by something in that?
It's possible. I think the crystal star itself, the Cersei system,
Yeah, I feel like that
was
was
affecting his
part of the
mind.
thing.
Or
I just don't remember
I
because
think it
it's
was. I did revisit that a couple times over the years. Most recently, about 6 years ago, or 5 years ago, I should say. And it's, you know what, the Crystal Star. It's not a horrible book. It's just that by Star Wars book standards, and even the Bantam standards, it's in the bottom two or three.
yeah.
But it's not a horrible book. When I revisited it, and just like with all these, there's little nuggets of good and bad in each one. And in some cases, I love the world building, and almost every book does that to one degree or another really good. Um, but that was the one where Waru, that creature from the Force, who's like healing people
Yes.
mostly, and then burning others to a crisp randomly. Um, it's like he's this amorphous creature from another dimension
Yeah.
who's trying to break into the Star Wars galaxy, and then Luke has to. It was like Leia and Han jump in because they took one of the kids, and then Luke goes in, and they're all swimming inside of Waru in this energy field, and
You're right. We
it
don't need to
was
cover this book.
no, we don't. So, and then Planet of the Twilight, um, Leia has a lightsaber duel with oh, who was it? It was that Hutt Jedi who was like a dark Jedi, but he was a Hutt. I can't remember his name offhand.
Beldorian.
Beldorian the Hutt. Yes. I just remember they had a duel. I don't remember. I think she kills him, but that stuck out in my memory. And then I think at the end of the book, Luke and Callista never meet face to face. He sees her at a distance or something, and they just wave at each other, and then they leave and they go their separate ways. It was something kind of sad, where that's how it ended.
God forbid you kill her.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, Callista did show up in a short story by Barbara Hamley, not long after, called "Murder in Slush Time," that was in the Star Wars Adventure Journal. So she had a little bit more story, and yeah, so there was that,
I
and
seem to recall people wondering if she was going to show up in the New Jedi Order
yeah,
because the Yezin Vong could not touch the Force
right.
or whatever.
I remember that. I remember you talking about that. Um, and I think that's a valid theory, and it's kind of a shame it didn't pan out with anything.
They should have given Barbara one of the books.
I know. Um, and then let's see, going down the list here, there's a courtship of Princess Leia, which is also fairly important when in that it shows the marriage of Han and Leia. I mean,
Yeah.
that was pretty important because they're already married in the Thrawn trilogy, and of course, it's not really the most romantic book. I mean, Leia's pissed off at Han the whole time because he kidnaps her and takes her to
Yeah.
Dathomir. And that's another reason that book is important, because little did we know that Dathomir was going to be the huge, probably more than any planet in the EU, that has become massive in the canon as far as like, I mean, besides Coruscant, of course, but like,
And weirdly so, too.
very weirdly so, because it came from the courtship of Princess Leia, which was not. I mean, I think every fan in our era, we all read that book, but nobody was like, "Hey, that's my favorite Star Wars novel."
Right. Yeah.
It was like we all read it and then like forgot it, and then that was it. And there was a bunch of Force witches on Dathomir, and there was Warlord Zinj, who had a super star destroyer, and um, it seemed, Leia might marry Prince Isolde. It sounds weird when I say it.
I know.
I sold her.
I sold her.
But yeah, so I picked that up in paperback when it came out, and then it was just kind of like, whatever. But it's weird to think that Dathomir then showed up in the Clone Wars. It's been I don't think Rebels used it, but then dude, it's in Jedi Fallen Order. I'm running around on Dathomir. It's just strange, man. Who would have thought? But yeah, so that was just kind of a
and they retconned. I guess at the time it was kind of a retcon for Maul, right? Something with Maul.
yeah, because he was originally supposed to be from Iridonia,
Yeah,
according to his background notes, which is where the Zabrak basically came from. That was their home planet, according to
yeah,
various
and that
notes.
was the weird thing because it wasn't like because all that was like fleshed out as far as the Zabrak home planet and stuff, and Dathomir
Yeah.
wasn't that. But then they
Yes.
made him come from Dathomir.
Yes. So
And
that
it's like
was a retcon on their part. The Dathomir was his home planet,
and
not Iridonia.
it's just weird to have. I guess they like the name. I can't think
You
of
know,
another reason.
I know it is funny, and as far as internal consistency, I don't think it's a huge deal because there's species that have multiple quote unquote home planets that
Oh yeah,
they colonize. So, like for
hmm
example, we've got Calamarians and Quarrens on that one ocean planet in the Mandalorian
yeah,
that isn't calamari, and then we've got even the Grands. They're on Malastare because they represent Malastare, but then
hmm
they're also their original homeworld is Kenyan, so it's like okay, there's that. So yeah, as far as Zabrax, it was not a huge sticking point, but it is interesting as to why they went that route. Um, so Courtship of Princess Leia, pretty interesting continuity wise in the grand scheme of things.
I think my friend was reading Courtship of Princess Leia, and that's when I like really took notice of
Ah, yeah,
the EU starting up.
yeah,
Because I knew when I lived in Ohio back in I think '92, one of my friends was reading Heir to the Empire,
yeah,
and I kind of took notice. I was like, oh, that's cool, Star Wars novels.
yeah, yeah,
But it wasn't until later um, when I got back to California, and I think it was Courtship of Princess Leia that he was reading, and then I immediately bought the trilogy novelization.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
three
Right,
books
the
in one,
omnibus.
and I bought Truce of Bakura to start it like in chronological order, at least at that
Right,
time, which was
right.
I think it must have been mid '94.
Yeah, basically the same time I did because I think I started in September '94. It was
Mm-hmm.
like the first week of high school.
Yeah.
And yeah, I started with the trilogy omnibus too. To me, it seemed like the proper starting point. Start with the movies, understand the points of the movies that you might not have picked up watching them,
Yeah.
and then what's funny though, going back to that briefly, I had already had the Return of the Jedi novelization from 4 or 5 years earlier, but I had never read it because actually I think I had a couple copies. I had a small paperback with some movie pictures, and then I had a kind of slightly bigger edition that they called the Illustrated Edition because it had every few pages or so it had storyboard
Mm-hmm.
images, and it was like I just always had this really just for the art of the storyboard things. So I had this since I was a kid, and I just never read it. And then but yeah, I got the omnibus, and then so yeah, it was just kind of funny. Oh, and then my cousin, he had the A New Hope novelization. I
Mm-hmm.
remember we were at summer school at the same time, and I think he brought it to class that day, and we were just kind of flipping through and looking at the little movie stills that were in the middle of the book, because it was just
Yeah.
like you could look at those. But yeah, it's kind of funny how, in retrospect, those little threads. Now, as far as other books here, we got. I think we've covered 1995 pretty well. There was a lot of that was 94 into 95, just like you also. It was like that was when everything kicked off for us, and we were catching up on everything. And then, what do you remember about the Corellian trilogy?
I didn't read it until much later
Mm.
because I was reading stuff at like later than it came out.
Yeah.
Because I was reading stuff in order and like doing other stuff. So like I must have read
How
that.
late are you thinking? 96 or 97 or?
Oh man, it must have been 97 because I don't even think I had read it before I met you and Jess. So
Okay.
it could have been I could have like held off on that until 98 even.
Yeah.
It was nice because it was different.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was like a super weapon, but it wasn't like a Death Star. It
Right.
wasn't something that the Imperials created. It was
Right.
sort of more in a different realm of sci-fi where like some other ancient alien species had made it or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really cool concept. So I liked that. And obviously Thraken Sol Solo was
Yeah.
kind of
An
a
interesting
cool antagonist.
a foil for Han
Yeah.
being connected to him and all. And yeah, you know what? That was one that at the time I just thought was just kind of like okay, kind of like whatever. But then when I revisited it in 2015, 2016, I appreciated it a lot more. And the political stuff was really well written. It was a book that perhaps could have been condensed into one novel. It was kind of padded and stretched out a little bit as a trilogy, but I enjoyed it a lot more now, and it also added to the personalities of Jason, Jaina, and Anakin a lot because
Mm-hmm.
they have their little side adventure where they try and escape Thraken, and Anakin learns how to use the Starbuster or Center Point Station, I should say. And yeah, so it was. I think people should go back and check that one out. That's another one that I think improves with time. And my only criticism is that it wraps up too quickly. And we only got a couple more books here I want to briefly mention. I mean, we could go more in depth on some, but the other ones I think we'll leave for a whole podcast. Like we'll probably have a whole episode on the X-Wing series at some point. So we don't really need to cover those. But Shadows of the Empire, that would probably be another full podcast by Steve Perry. That was a key novel in a lot of places. And then
And an event too.
that was an event.
It
That was
was definitely
96.
marketed as an event book
Yeah, that
because
was the big.
they had all the tie-in stuff, the soundtrack, and the
Yeah, and
multimedia CD
it was
and
meant to
games.
build into the special editions. That was like the
Yeah,
big. Like they wanted to test the marketing, like see if they could do this with that, and then basically transplant all that to the special editions.
yeah.
And but then I guess we'll briefly talk about the Hand of Thrawn duology, Spectre of the Past and Vision of the Future. Um, I read Spectre of the Past within a few weeks of it coming out. I devoured it. It's like, oh, a new Zahn novel. Like, other than some short stories, I hadn't read any. We hadn't had a novel since The Last Command, and in the end, though, as intricately plotted as that trilogy was, and as much as it brushed up and retconned and tidied things throughout the Bantam era, which it did greatly, the plot I found to just be kind of so-so.
Mm-hmm.
It was just kind of like, okay, well, Luke and Mara, they go to this planet. They basically develop their relationship. They realize things about each other that they had been feeling for a while or whatever. But then it just kind of, I don't know. There was the whole thing with Thrawn seeming to be back, but then it's an actor playing him, and spoiler alert. And then I don't know, like, and then there was George Cardis, Talon Card reconnects with him, and he was the one that was on Dagobah when Yoda fought the Dark Jedi, and it,
Oh, right.
you know,
I
it,
forgot about that.
there was a lot in the plot. It was kind of intricate and it kind of wove in and out with some different things. But I don't know. In the end, when I think of those books, and I read Vision of the Future like just I think it was about 2 years after it came out. It was like late 2000s when I read that one. I don't know. They to me they in my memory they're just okay.
I think they serve their purpose, which was primarily just to get Luke and Mara together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything else was kind of just like, okay. Like, everybody loved Thrawn. Everybody still loves Thrawn,
Right.
obviously. But it was kind of like, come on, just an imposter type thing. I mean,
I know.
I don't know that a clone would be better, you know.
Well, it
But
was ironic is at the end of Vision of the Future there was a clone that they see like I think Luke slashes his lightsaber through the tank and or it was already destroyed or something. But there's like a destroyed cloning facility and they see like a half body of Thrawn hanging out or something. And so it's funny that like that was part of the plot, but it never came to fruition.
I don't remember that, but it's been 20
Yeah, it's been a
plus
while.
years.
Yeah, I keep meaning to get around to those again, but
It would, I think, and hopefully they do this in the new series that are coming out because
mhm,
the stuff that I've seen, the speculation that I've seen for all these new Disney Plus series that are coming out with Republic Commandos, right?
mhm. Yeah.
And then, well, less so the Andor series, but
Oh, you were
um,
thinking of the Rangers of the New
oh,
Republic, right?
Rangers, that's what it is. That's a game,
Republic
right?
Commando. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a stupid game. Yeah, Rangers of the New Republic, Ahsoka, all that stuff. I
Yeah.
think that they could be building for. I mean, from the speculation I've seen, it could be using the Marvel blueprint,
Yeah.
and Thrawn could be the big bad.
Mhm.
That's
He's the new Thanos.
connecting. It's yeah, exactly, and connecting all that stuff together. And the speculation springs from it's John Favreau overseeing all of this, and Kevin Feige has
Yeah.
lent his help to
Right.
it.
Right.
I don't think in any specific capacity that anybody's said, but like I know he's a big Star Wars fan, and I think he jumped at the chance to
Mhm.
um,
And I'm fine with
help.
that. I think he's done a great job with Marvel.
And that was kind of the shortcoming, I think, in hindsight when compared to the New Jedi Order.
Mhm. With the
Was that there
round table
wasn't
kind of thing.
well, it just wasn't a big bad that lasted for more than a trilogy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like Thrawn would have been perfect for that, and that's kind of even before the New Jedi Order. When you look at the duology, it's like
Mhm.
that's it's kind of a tease for Thrawn. He
Yeah.
doesn't really come back, and obviously in hindsight now and stuff, you look back and you're like, oh, it would have been cool if he was like a big bad for multiple trilogies,
Right.
multiple duologies, like the Yuzhan Vong were for the New Jedi Order, and
Right.
hopefully that might be the case with these new series coming out.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly that is the strong speculation, and based on what we know from the name drop by Ahsoka. So yeah, I agree and all with all that. And that was the thing about the Bantam era. Like I said, they were just kind of it was like a big ball of tinfoil. They're just throwing pieces on willy nilly, just here and there. And sometimes you'd have to close a gap or fix something.
Yeah,
And actually,
over.
I think Zahn, I was going to say, he did a great job with that, with Luke and Mara, how, because you would see Mara with Lando in some of those older books, like Children
Yes,
of the
yes,
Jedi. And
yeah.
I like that and who knows, maybe this was planned with those authors back then, because he used to be in contact with, in the Thanks and all those books.
Hmm.
But, it was part of the plan that her and Lando were going off on these missions together. And it was all to find George Cardos, I think. And yeah, as far as that, it really. when I read those sections, I was like, oh, that's good. I like that. So
Yeah, I mean, and that was the cap
yeah,
for at least as far as
as far as Bantam,
the main characters go. That was the
yep,
cap for the Bantam books.
yeah, because there was the Vision of the Future was that cap. Although, yeah, there was further X-wing books. There was a couple bounty hunter books that came out in
Yeah.
'99, and then Tales from the New Republic, another anthology, was the last one in December '99. Um,
So
and yeah,
overall, Bantam was a lot of fun. You didn't take it very serious.
yeah,
Um,
it was a fun era, and all those Drew Struzan covers. Even though he
mhm.
didn't do every single one, he did the vast majority, at least 75%. And man, nothing today or any time has ever touched how those covers look to me.
Oh, they're still great. I love them. Even the bad ones. I mean, the
Even the
bad
bad
books.
ones.
Not bad covers, bad books.
Yeah, the bad books. It was just kind of like, yeah, they. I don't know, the Star Wars fonts and a Struzan cover, plus even the font of the book title. It just screamed classic Star Wars to me. And I understand that Struzan doesn't loan out his services to. He doesn't do like book covers anymore. Like that was just a kind of a thing he did back then. And I don't even think he paints for movies anymore. He's like slowed down,
Hmm.
but nothing will beat that era as far as like how it looked, how it was, the
Hmm.
presentation. It was a crazy, strange time to be a Star Wars fan, where suddenly Star Wars was cool again. There was the prequels on the horizon, the special editions were coming, and it was like LucasArts was arguably at its peak as far as creativity and you know
Pumping out Star Wars games and stuff.
yeah, like what a time, man.
Well, too, I think a lot of people forget because there's so much argument over and anxiety over canon now.
Hmm.
What's canon, what's not canon.
Right.
We wish this was canon, whatever. Um, Back then, obviously there was a lot of head canon you had to do and pick and
Hmm.
choose depending on what it was. And at the end of the day, I think everybody agreed there was Lucas canon, and
Yeah.
then there would be tiers down
Yeah.
below that.
Yeah.
And I think people just need to remember that and go back to that
Yeah.
if they want to. That's what I do.
Yeah. That
So
yeah, obviously for me, I merge it all in my own way in my head canon. But as far as like if you want to have an argument with somebody, like look, it's the movies and then everything else. That's just kind of, I mean, well, the Disney movies, that's a whole other subject. But let's just say it's the Lucas movies and then
mhm,
everything else. It's
yeah,
the original six.
right.
So
Because I mean there'll be people that don't want to consider the prequels as canon. So
yeah, yeah,
I mean, there's all sorts of it's all sorts of shades of gray.
I'm sorry, but everyone's gonna have to deal with their midichlorians and Jar Jar and Gungans, and it's a part of life. You got to take it. You got to eat your cabbage to get your applesauce.
Yes, it's a weird way to put it, but
Yeah.
it
So
was definitely a mess, but a fun mess.
yes, it was. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this episode. I think other books that we didn't get to, they'll definitely be coming down the line in other podcasts because there's a lot more. But I think we covered the broad strokes of the Bantam era quite well. And so just remember to leave us a comment, leave us a like on the YouTube videos. We got our Facebook page. Just look up Star Wars Unfiltered. We're at Star Wars Unfiltered at yahoo.com. We got our Instagram page. And yeah, so that's it. And hope everyone enjoyed the episode. And we'll catch you next time.
Good night.
Good night.